Yeah, art and science are not as different as they may seem. They're both ways of observing and interpreting natural phenomena.
You are listening to Your University, the FGCU Podcast, and with us today is super student or student extraordinaire, Macy Noll. Macy, welcome.
Hello, thank you so much.
Do you know why I call you a super student?
I'm doing a lot.
I think that's an understatement, Macy. So Macy is a double major, and not only are you a double major, and we'll get into that, but you are involved on campus.
Yes.
It sounds like to me, and it looks like to me, that you just jumped in with both feet and said, you know what, I'm going to make the most out of my college career. Why is that?
Absolutely. I mean, I love learning and I have such a passion for it. I think that's part of the reason why I want to be a scientist, so that I can just continue learning for the rest of my life and researching and discovering new things. So yeah, I was super excited to come to college. I kind of never wanted high school to end, but since it had to, I came to college and I've stretched this out for as long as I possibly can as well.
So you are a double major. We touched upon that. Art and science, and we'll get to those because I think they're total opposite. You don't agree. So I'm going to have you explain why to everybody. But some of the things you're involved in, and you can add to it or correct me if I'm wrong, but you got involved pretty early on. You're a campus naturalist, public artist on campus and underwater, which is fascinating. Research assistant. You do volunteer work in the community and on campus. Master diver and dive instructor. And you've dabbled in some underwater video at some point as well.
Yeah, so started off as a campus naturalist, and that's kind of how I got involved in the environmental education aspect at FGCU. And then I discovered the scientific diving course. And that was kind of how that happened was really interesting because I actually got introduced to the environmental science side of FGCU through the art side. I was taking a ceramics class, Ceramics 1, with Patricia Fay, and she had been asked by Vester Field Station to do a research project creating these biomimetic clay sculptures that could be installed on Kimberly's Reef to help facilitate benthic settlement. So attracting all those little organisms that help to build the foundation of the reef.
Okay, we're going to have to back up a little bit.
Okay, yeah, no worries.
Because this is fascinating, and this is a great story in itself. So we're going to back up and explain what Vester is. Just for our listeners, Vester is in Bonita Springs. It's a research laboratory on the water on Estero Bay. And Kimberly's Reef is out in the Gulf.
Yes.
And it is a research reef, correct? What am I missing?
Yes. So this is super exciting to me because I did not know when I came to FGCU, even though I was intending on studying marine biology, I didn't know we had a marine field station. And so I was very excited to figure that out and to go there and experience it and to get involved with everything they're doing there. Kimberly's Reef is an artificial reef comprised of 6 villages of 3 massive cement culverts each, and it's located about 8 nautical miles offshore of Bonita Beach. And it's really meant to be this living laboratory and outdoor classroom so that marine science students and biology students like myself, anyone doing environmental research or wanting to get involved no matter what their major, can actually get out there and get that real world experience of getting into the field, collecting the samples themselves, taking those back to the laboratory, analyzing the samples, analyzing the data, and getting that big picture of what it looks like to be an environmental scientist. So Professor Fay had approached me, and we had done some other assignments in class that were kind of marine focused because
in a ceramics class.
Yes, we had this project where it was kind of, you picked a marine benthic organism and then sculpted it, and the project was 3 sculptures, and by the end of the 3rd sculpture, the organism had somehow morphed into some kind of vessel.
Okay, so when you say benthic again, and the organisms, would we recognize any of those names?
Yes, so you've got your corals and sponges and crabs, and so there's like sessile and mobile benthic organisms, basically everything that's kind of living on the bottom of the ocean, sometimes on a coral reef, and forming that foundation for life.
Okay, so you're sculpting and trying to transform these.
Yes. And so that was one project that I was super excited to do that and really just threw myself into it. And so I think she noticed that and she was like, wow, she really likes marine biology. And so when she had been asked to do this research project, she decided to run it as a Seidler undergraduate research project, which typically happens over the summer, and it's a collaboration between a professor and a student. And so she approached me, not even knowing that I was pursuing a dual degree in art and biology.
Just by chance.
Just by chance. She was like, this is an art student who really loves biology.
And what was the object of this research? I want you really to go into it. What was she asked to do? What did you help her with? And what was the outcome, or what was supposed to be the end result?
Our main interest was investigating ceramics as an alternative artificial reef material. So the types of materials that we are using to create artificial reefs can have different effects on what kind of organisms might settle there. At least that's the hypothesis. So ceramics is totally natural material. And what's really cool about it is it's very plastic, it's very sculptable. And so you can create all kinds of texture, which marine organisms really love texture that increases the surface area that they can settle on. It gives them something to grip onto. And ceramics have both kind of macroscopic texture and microscopic texture. So we worked with 2 different clay bodies.
And these are all environmentally safe as well,
yes,
right?
Absolutely. Totally natural materials. So they wouldn't have an adverse effect on the environment. They wouldn't be leaching chemicals of any kind. So that makes them a really good candidate for an artificial reef material. And then creating these sculptures, we ended up creating 62 in total.
Wow.
And another aspect of them is they were biomimetic. So that means mimicking biology.
Okay.
So they look like something that you would find on a coral reef. And the idea behind that is we want to not impose our own human ideas of what the environment might look like or need, but to take from nature what's already working and see if we can recreate that in order to help facilitate new growth.
So you spend all this time making the 62 sculptures, trying to mimic nature, right, as best you can, and also fit it into research. What kind of material is better? Is it better at all? Does it matter at all? And when it's done, then what happens?
So there would be monitoring over the years, and that's been an important part of Kimberly's Reef. Is the main purpose of it is to have an artificial reef that we can monitor from the reef's inception.
Did you have to go put them underwater?
Yes.
So is that where you got introduced to?
Exactly. That was my first time going out with Vester on one of the fleet boats and interacting with scientific divers. So I met some of the divers who would later become my colleagues and got to watch them take the sculptures. They're in their scuba gear, they're back rolling off the side of the boat, and they're taking those sculptures down to the reef. So that was very exciting.
Was it a bit of FOMO though for you?
A little bit. They told me I wasn't allowed to dive, even though at this point I was open water certified. So I had that introductory training as a scuba diver, but more recreational. And they told me I could snorkel. So I had my snorkel gear and I tried to dive down, which it's about 30 feet deep, and I'm not the best free diver. So I couldn't get down to see the actual reef, but I was there in the water and I was like, oh, I can't wait until I can actually dive with them. So
it kind of lit a fire under you to get that certification.
Yes.
And so when were you finally able to dive down in there and see your sculptures?
Yes. So the requirement for the scientific diving course is to have your open water certification. And then we say about 10 dives of experience under your belt, just to make sure that you're nice and comfortable in the water, and that you're going to really be able to be successful and thrive in the scientific diving class. What the course does is help take you from just recreational diving up to the level of a scientific diver. So really hones your scuba diving skills to the point where they become instinctual muscle memory, and you can then focus on keeping track of everything that you need to, but also adding other things onto that, like scientific equipment and looking at the environment and taking notes and things like that. So,
Underwater taking notes?
Yes. Yeah.
How do you do that?
You might have a slate, or sometimes you can actually have waterproof paper that you can print on. We actually this past week just gave our students their underwater midterm, which is not so much.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's super fun. It's the most fun exam you've ever taken in your life. But it's not so much the actual questions on the exam, because the questions are like, write down the name of every student in your class, of like just random things. And then what we're really looking for is, can you be writing underwater and also maintain neutral buoyancy? So you're not touching the bottom of the pool, you're not floating up to the top.
It sounds like a really fun class, but it is not an easy class.
Definitely. And I think that's what makes it so fun, partially, is it's a big challenge.
So you got your certifications, you got down there, you saw it for the first time. What did you think?
I mean, I was so excited just to be out in the field. And I don't remember, I might have gotten to see the sculptures that are down there the first time I dove the reef. But there wasn't a whole lot on the reef to begin with, because it had just been recently deployed. And so there was a little bit of fuzzy growth here and there. But I would probably say the most amazing experience I had diving the reef during my research assistantship was the first time that we saw the first coral colonies growing on there. I was down with Adam Catasus, and he had the underwater camera, and we were taking pictures of the different organisms that had started growing on the reef, and we found the first coral colony.
Congratulations.
So exciting. And he had me put my finger next to it and took a picture so that we could tell what the scale of the colony was. And it was just this little golden mound, but very exciting, because corals are that foundation of the reef that builds the reef structure that everything else can build off of. So
you were a little geeked out.
Yes, a little geeked.
You were the first to see it.
Yeah.
With Adam.
With Adam, yeah. Probably not the first to see it, but that was the first time it was documented, yes.
It didn't happen unless it was documented.
Right. Pics didn't happen.
Yeah. And we're probably going to mention it a few more times. You're a double major, arts and science, a biology major. What came first for you, the love of art or the love of science?
I would have to say the love of art. Artists listening to this will relate when I say we get a lot of the same comments when we're creating art, and it's typically something like, man, that's amazing. Like, I wish I could draw like that. I can only draw a stick figure, or I draw like a 5-year-old.
That's me.
Yeah, exactly. And no shame at all. My high school art teacher had this amazing way of putting it, which is, the reason you draw like a 5-year-old is because you stopped drawing when you were 5. So everyone has the ability to develop that skill. I think people sometimes have this idea that art is based on talent alone, and it's just something that you're kind of born with. But I didn't come out painting and drawing. I was given, a coloring book and a crayon when I was 5 years old, and I just started coloring, and I just didn't stop. So I have 22 years of experience now painting and drawing, and that's the reason why I'm an artist today. Science, on the other hand, was a much longer journey for me. I always loved nature, or at least the idea of nature. I grew up, I was born in Florida, but my family spent some time in Alabama, but we would come back down to Florida to visit my grandparents, and that was typically during the summer, during the rainy season, and so it would be raining in the afternoon, and I'd be at my grandparents' house, and we couldn't go play outside, so they would put on Planet Earth documentaries. And those were my favorite movies as a little kid. I would just sit there for hours, like amazed in wonder and awe at the natural world. But it always seemed inaccessible and unattainable to me, which is part of why I have such a passion for sharing it now, because I think that a lot of the environmental issues we currently face are not causes, but symptoms of what I'd call an ecological identity crisis, We don't know how to belong to the ecosystems that sustain us. We don't know how to be a part of our own natural habitat.
When did you think it could be obtainable? At what age and where were you in your life?
So everything kind of changed for me. Senior year of high school, I took a class called Florida Natural History. And it wasn't taught by the biology teacher, as you might expect. It was actually taught by the art teacher. And we hand-bound these sketchbooks, and we went out into nature, and we drew the native flora and fauna. And it was those personal encounters with the natural world, interpreted through creativity, that really cemented it for me and helped me to develop that, what I call an ecological identity of the feeling of belonging in the natural world and not being separated from it and being a part of it. So that was an amazing experience for me and was really the beginning of this idea that creative practices are such a powerful environmental education tool. And I thought, I've always been an artist. I will always be an artist. What if I used art to communicate science? And that kind of wasn't articulated as clearly at the beginning. I was just like, art and science. That's what I'm going to do.
You're going to make them work.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know how it's going to work, but I'm going to do it anyway. And so then I came to FGCU and started going down that path and have learned just how many ways that art and science really do overlap and the power of creative practices and environmental education. So that's kind of, how it coalesced for me.
So tell me a little bit more about that, because I think I said in the beginning, it seems like oil and water, right? Arts and science, but you're kind of putting it into perspective how they can intertwine. One of your professors, Patricia Fay, is an example that she did a scientific study as an artist, and she's a certified diver as well.
Exactly. Yeah, art and science are not as different as they may seem. They're both ways of observing and interpreting natural phenomena. So art is more emotional, it's more expansive. Science is more reductive, it's more logical, but they're both two different methodologies of observation and interpretation. And I come back to this quote over and over. You will only protect what you love, and you'll only love what you know, and you can only know what you've been taught. And so there's this importance to both knowing and loving in order to inspire meaningful action. And so that's really how art and science fit together and why their collaboration is so powerful.
Knowing and loving. I like that. Yeah. And that's how they fit together.
Yes.
The knowing and the loving. Do you feel that way every time you create a piece of art?
Absolutely. And especially because much of my art is inspired by my experiences doing research or being out in nature in the field. I think, every artist draws inspiration from somewhere. Sometimes it's emotional experiences, sometimes it's social experiences. For me, it's experiences out in nature and in science. So I definitely draw from those experiences, and then I interpret them through artwork and reflect on them. And that kind of solidifies the experience, which is another way that art complements environmental education. Is it's active versus passive learning, and it's a way of reflecting on and really internalizing what you've learned.
So for our listeners or viewers, if they're on YouTube out there, we're not all going to be able to see your artwork and research at the bottom of Kimberly's Reef.
Right.
But we can all take a journey to the library on campus.
Yes.
And see an amazing mural you painted. In fact, you painted it in front of people for how many weeks were you working on it?
Let's see, maybe 4 or 5 weeks since the beginning of the semester.
It's right on the first floor of the library. It's beautiful. We have some video of you out there, but you can see some of this artwork. And what inspired you?
So it was an open call for artists that the library sent out because they're kind of pioneering this mural project for the library. And the theme that they gave was knowledge in motion. And so the first thing I thought of was, we have all these amazing science classes where you sit down and you learn the material, but then taking that knowledge out into the field as a scientific diver, as a marine researcher, is knowledge in motion. So I thought about all the experiential learning opportunities that I've gotten to engage in and just wanted to reflect on those and also spread the word because it can be so impactful to seek out those opportunities and to engage in them as a student. It can really take your collegiate experience to the next level.
So inspiration.
Yes.
Knowledge and inspiration.
Exactly.
You also said in a part of the video that we have, and we can link it as well, that every time you go underwater and you dive, it's like a lucid dream.
Yes.
Can you explain that?
Absolutely. Diving is unlike any other experience you can have on this earth. Scuba diving, you're just completely weightless and suspended in the water column and surrounded. It's totally immersive experience, literally and figuratively. And you see the most amazing things. And you can have, at least my experience has been, a much closer interaction with wildlife than you can on land. The fish will swim all around you and you can get really close up to the corals and everything. And so it's such just an up close and personal experience. But even besides the amazing wildlife, for me, like as an artist, it's the colors and like the light filtering through the water, and it almost feels like, to me, swimming in a painting. So
your painting seems to really bring it to life for me. I'm not a diver. I don't do that. I don't know if I'd be good at that. But I feel like I can experience it through your art.
That's wonderful. That makes me so happy.
Yeah, it makes me happy to see it. So thank you. And for everyone listening out there, go check it out. Do you feel like you're blazing a trail to educate people on the arts and science intertwining? I think you gave a presentation about it.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, I was invited to give the keynote speech at the Environmental Education Alliance for Southwest Florida conference. That was this past November. And that was an amazing experience for me, and I was so grateful for it because it really allowed me to synthesize a lot of the things that I had kind of nebulously been thinking about over the past 5 years studying art and science. And it was also incredibly impactful for me as well to see people's responses. They were quite emotional, which I was amazed by. There were grad students who asked tearful questions at the end of, I'm a scientist, but I've always loved art, and I felt like I had to choose. And I got the question of like, where did you get the confidence to just do it, basically, and blaze that trail? And so in some ways, I feel that I might be blazing a trail. It definitely wasn't one that was clearly marked, for sure. I know I'm not the first to have this idea of uniting art and science, and I spoke about some voices in that arena during my speech, but I also just shared that experience for me, the transformative experience of becoming reconnected to the environment through artwork.
What made you decide FGCU, and are you pleased with your choice?
Absolutely. This place has really become like home for me, and I love Southwest Florida. And part of the reason that I feel so reconnected to the environment is I grew up in Orlando, kind of in the big city, but then coming down here for college, I kind of got to know Florida almost for the first time. Sort of after that first class that I took on Florida natural history, I got to come down and then really get immersed in it, and that was wonderful. But kind of the choice between, there were a bunch of colleges that I initially was thinking about, but then I narrowed it down to UF and FGCU. And I toured both campuses multiple times and was really struck by the environmental focus of FGCU, which has become kind of my favorite thing about FGCU. And I was also told that undergraduates could get experience, firsthand experience working in the lab, working in the field, doing research. And so that was very attractive to me because I wanted that experiential learning. So that was definitely a huge part of the decision in coming here.
And you got that.
Yes,
You were
exactly.
an undergrad research assistant.
Yes.
Did you get to do cool things?
Absolutely, yes. So I spent 2 years studying Benthic settlement on Kimberly's reef, collecting samples, looking through a microscope at all the little microscopic critters that are in the water column and settling on the reef. So that was an amazing experience.
And you got to become a campus naturalist. And so for people who don't know, this is a really special thing for Florida Gulf Coast University. About half of our 800 acres are preserved. It won't be built on. It's either natural or just preserved wetlands, pinelands, and there are paths all around that you, as a naturalist, can take other classes and professors and help them really get to understand that natural beauty. How did you hear about it, and what was your experience like?
Let's see. I think it might have been a Canvas announcement that I saw, and I heard the words campus naturalist, and I was like, I don't know what that is, but it sounds awesome. So I looked into it. So I applied and got the job as a campus naturalist. And I love that you mention all of our protected land on campus, because that is another reason why I loved FGCU. It's so beautiful, and you don't have to leave campus to experience natural Florida. And so even in the middle of Estero, on campus, you can experience beautifully pristine nature and be surrounded by cypress trees. And sometimes, depending on if it's wet season or dry season, you could be up to your neck in water, or maybe just to your knees, and really be immersed in the environment. So
it is an amazing experience. I've been out there twice. Once it was just over, my calf, and then another time, almost to my chest. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing. Even in the middle of summer, the water is cool. It did feel like you were in an entirely different world, even though you're in the middle of campus.
Exactly.
Right? Like a spiritual kind of feeling.
Yeah, which is wonderful because we were made to exist in nature. And so there's been all this research done of how it can be beneficial for mental health. And I know we have some of our environmental education professors on campus are specifically doing research on that, how it affects the human brain, how it affects our social systems to be out in nature together. So that's a wonderful resource for FGCU students, even to just be able to take a break from classes real quick and go out into nature and be like, take a deep breath.
Very beneficial. And what would be your advice to students coming to Florida Gulf Coast University for the first time? What would be your advice for them to get the most out of their experience, not just the educational side, but the extras?
Right. I would say form relationships with other classmates, upperclassmen, and professors who will be able to let you know what opportunities there are. The reason why I initially got involved is my ceramics professor was doing something, and so she invited me into that. And so because I had a relationship with her, I was able to take advantage of that opportunity. So definitely know that there are endless opportunities out there. There are multiple avenues for getting involved. You could be doing research, you could be doing community service, other experiential learning opportunities. So the possibilities are endless.
That they are. And then for the listeners out there who may not be as familiar with Florida Gulf Coast University, what would you tell them about how they can experience our university?
Yes, yeah. Well, we have all kinds of educational resources and even volunteer opportunities. If you have young children, Vester has summer camps that you can send them to so that they can get that firsthand experience out in nature. They can go on campus. We also have conferences like the Environmental Education Conference, where community partners can get together and connect and learn from one another. So all kinds of opportunities.
They can see your mural at the library.
Yes, they could.
Right? We're a public campus. Come on, park.
Yes,
take a
absolutely.
look. They can go to the food forest.
Yes.
Which is also a very neat opportunity to go and just check out some nature.
It's beautiful there.
See what kind of food is growing on campus. Great. Well, Macy, it has been a pleasure talking with you today. The sky's the limit, or the depths of the ocean
Absolutely.
are the limits for you. And you've really embraced the college experience, and it's just been a pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.